Good morning, everyone. It is Pastors Dan and Brad coming to you live for the Monday recap.
Here we are.
Brad, first of all, let's talk about the Monday recap in general and how this came about. And then we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about, which was yesterday. And then we're going to talk about something else. So you were the one who had the idea for the Monday recap. Tell us a little bit about where that came up.
So I think the first sermon, we had talked through quite a bit, and when we put it all together and we ran it through, there were points later that we didn't really get to, and there was more that we could talk about application, I think. And so in being time conscious on Sunday, we're not going to develop every point to the full amount. And so I said, what if we come back on Monday for those that are interested, and we dig in a little bit deeper? So that was the first one, and then it's...
I don't want to say we had to do this thing, because we enjoy doing this thing.
Yeah, this is good.
So this is all right. So, for example, today we want to talk a little bit about the verse that we talked about yesterday. And whereas sometimes we say, here's some points that we know ahead of time, we could dive into this on Monday. Sometimes Monday is a little bit of a response or a reflection on what happened on Sunday's message, or in one case on our James Bible study. Our very first James Bible study, you and I had a lot of conversation about that one verse, and the verse is Proverbs 22. Even Sunday morning, as we were touching base, we said, all right, remember, we got to drive this point home. And then after the sermon, I walked away and I thought, I'm not sure we drove that point depart from it. We talked yesterday a little bit about some of the pressure that puts on parents who feel, is this entirely up to me? And I'll just say some of the guilt that some parents feel when their children do depart from the path, because they say, this proverb said this, and my children went and they did something else. So is there something wrong with me? Did I do something wrong? And we talked about Proverbs in general. The Proverbs are premises, not promises. They're statements of general truth. And part of what we wanted to communicate to parents is that you do your part, but there are other factors. There's going to be other influences in children, and that God and the Holy Spirit has a factor as well. But we kept saying during the week, we need to be careful, though, that we don't inadvertently create a scenario where parents shrug it off and say, I'll do my part.
It doesn't matter. Almost like it doesn't matter what I do, because at the end, it's all God's work anyway.
Or my kid's going to make their own decision. And
And so it is a tricky balance, I think, when we look at the verse. But ultimately, one of the things I think we wanted to drive home was not just looking at the outcome, because if we look at the outcome, we say, well, why bother, maybe? So many parents have tried and it hasn't worked. But at the end of the day, if we are parents, the Bible indicates that we're called to do this.
Right.
We are called to do it. And obviously, we talked about many of the factors and influences that mean that it may not work out the way that we hope. Because when we up our game, so to speak, and we really input into our kids with the hope that they will follow the Lord, and they don't, it seems like so much energy and so many years for naught. And I think at the end of the day, we have to come back to the fact that God asks us to do things in Scripture, not just in parenting, but sometimes irrespective of what the outcome will be for us, he still says, this is what I want you to do. And I think that is somewhere where we wanted to land, that parents wouldn't just say, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's all in God's hands, and so it's in spite of me. There's this sense in which that's true, that God raises up believers from homes where they had no input. But I think God is asking those of us who are believers to take this seriously and step up to the plate.
Well, I'm certain of it. And I'm certain that was the main point of that verse, that we said we need to drive this home. And I'm not sure we did completely. That parents, you do have a responsibility to train up your child. One of the examples that I've used before, and you've alluded to it also, are parents who are maybe a little apathetic about the faith aspect of raising up their children. And usually it's phrased for me, what I hear parents phrasing it is, well, I don't want to push this on my child. In fact, some parents will even say, I'm afraid if I push too much, it will drive my child away. I'm going to respect my child's choice, and my child will make their own choice. Here's the thing. You're right. Your child will make their own choice. They don't need your permission to grow up and make their own choice. Every child makes a choice. Now, you brought up a great yesterday. You don't sit under someone for 20 years and not be somehow influenced by them. For sure. Certainly, I am influenced by my mother and my father. But there are other choices that I made on my own, and I became my own person. So it's not as though parents need to give their kids permission for that. The other thing to keep in mind is that when a parent is so hands-off and say, I'm not going to make the choice for my child, I'm going to let my child make that choice on their own, you have made the choice. You just don't realize it. Your apathy will be viewed as a value. My mom and dad didn't care enough about this, therefore it's not important. Right. And we need to be careful with that. You have got to stress to your children how important this is. In fact, we're going to get into this more and more because we're looking at Deuteronomy. Now, for the past couple of weeks, we've been having a memory verse.
Yes.
And we did not introduce a memory verse yesterday during the service, nor are we about to introduce a memory verse other than to say, be watching our social media. We are going to get it up there. It's going to come from Deuteronomy chapter 4. We're going to continue talking more and more about the importance of raising children. And we've been trying to do it with a balance to say these aren't just messages for parents,
right?
Because the New Testament describes the church as a family, and we all have input in that.
Yeah.
So let's talk now about why that point didn't get made yesterday. And I think I know why. And I thought it just might be interesting to talk a little bit about our process. How do we come together on Sunday morning? I mean, are we winging it?
This is going to be good, Dan.
Yeah.
So can we back up even before to the vision that you had? So when we knew that we were coming into this season of no services on site, you were communicating to the elders, to me, I have kind of a vision about how we're going to go about it, which people are experiencing now.
That's right. That's right.
And can you like back up to that vision and how it was going to play out, and then we'll get into how it's been working?
Yeah, absolutely. So well, first of all, let's go back even further to some of the initial conversations that the elders had. And we've said this before, that there was a Sunday, our last Sunday that we met together. Even that Sunday, attendance was low. The nation was becoming aware of a growing pandemic.
Yes.
And even then, there were some people who were not comfortable meeting, but the state had not yet stepped in a powerful way.
And that Sunday, we were taking measures in children's ministry even. We were sanitizing, and we were just starting to up our game because we knew there was an expectation. This is happening, and we need to respond well.
Yeah. Now, on that particular Sunday, I remember I ended the service by saying, I don't know what next week holds. I knew in that moment what I wanted for next week. I wanted us to press forward in that moment. I was going to advocate that we keep meeting, we communicate to people. If you're vulnerable or uncomfortable, stay at home. And many of us as elders said, we left worship feeling the same way, and then in the course of 24 hours, events happened and it changed our minds. So now it's Monday night. The elders are meeting in a room. We're discussing how would we move forward. We would do this online somehow. We had already done, because of some snow days, we'd already done some pre-recording of a sermon. That was actually your idea. There was a Sunday coming up where we knew there was a chance we might cancel, and you were the one who said, could we have something ready to go ahead of time?
Sure.
And so I did. I came into an empty room. I preached to a camera. I like to get a little techie, so I tried to up the production value of it to make it interesting. And sure enough, we knew, we canceled, we made that video available. So I knew that was possible. And I said that on Monday night. Technology-wise, that was the least of my concerns. But then one of our other elders said, if we're going to do this, and he made a really compelling case for live streaming versus pre-recording. And what he said was, I know I can't be in the room with you, but knowing that you are live in the room makes me feel a little bit like I'm there. And I was sold on that. So I knew then we were going to live stream. We still had to work out details with music and technology and cameras, but I knew we were going to live stream. But I also knew this. I knew from that prior recording of the sermon that I'm okay standing in front of a camera preaching to an empty room. I can do it. But what happened was, with the order to stay at home, a lot of people were starting to feel a sense of isolation. We talked about that also. As the church, we're feeling more and more isolated. And I was worried that me standing alone in front of a camera was just going to drive home further that sense of isolation. Recognizing that it was going to be different anyway, I just said, let's own it. Let's just own the fact that this is different. Let's try not to increase the sense of isolation. Let's do something different. And I had this idea of you and I together having a format that was maybe a little more conversational. It creates more a sense of community if it's you and I, and we're talking together. So that was kind of the initial vision. Now, what's funny is, I first said that to you, and the first Sunday I kind of said to you, now don't worry, I said this will feel a little funny, but there are certain questions I want you to ask to lead me into the points that I'm going to make. But very quickly, you and I fell into a rhythm where it wasn't me saying, here's what you're going to say. You have had input as well. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about our process.
So for Sunday morning, first of all, part of the process was that you charted out a few weeks ahead. We tried to get a sense of where we were headed in terms of content overall. And then really how it works is you are preparing your notes, and I know the passage. And so independently, I'm reading it, and I'm reading some study material as well. I have some commentaries that I look at as well. Then I get your outline, and I go over that by email. And usually I print it out. I do have copies here. You know, we got paper. Reams of paper have gone into all these different outlines. And then I start thinking down through what I think I could develop or add by way of application or study points or things that I've read that you haven't already touched on. And I'll make notes of it. And usually we talk it over. Sometimes we've been really good and we've gotten it done Friday.
Earlier in the week.
And a lot of it is happening, frankly, Sunday morning early.
There are times, but you and I are both early risers, so we're here early. It's not like we're scrambling 15 minutes before a service.
We're here between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And starting to hammer these things out.
We do. And we sit down and we discuss how so we both have input. How are we going to play that input in? And this is part of the process. Now, the first couple weeks, we were very also time conscious, where we even walked through it once to kind of get a feel for time. And then we recognized that with the online format, there's it's a little bit more of a laid back sense, and so we're okay with that. What we've now noticed over the last few weeks is we're getting longer.
We're getting long-winded.
And that, I think two things happened yesterday. One was, I know for me, I got a little focused on that process of, okay, so where are you going to come in? Where am I going to come in? And then sometimes, based on what you're going to bring, I will add some PowerPoint slides as well. And so I was very focused on, this is your part, this is my part. And we, again, had kind of said, here's a main point we want to drive home. Parents, you do have a responsibility. But I think I got so caught up in some of the minor details that I lost that point. I feel like that's also what happened our first James study, was you and I pre-recorded that study. We said, let's up the production value. At the time, we thought we don't need to live stream everything. And if we record ahead of time, then we could really do some good stuff. And then what happened was the production value was so high that I felt like the message got lost in the production.
And also, if we're on that point of how that works out, I would say it changes how we record. When we're live, there's no redoing. We know that what we've said is going out and people are watching it and it's over. When we were recording, knowing that we could edit, we stopped and started, we covered, we masked, and then it takes considerable effort, and you've got the editing software, so you spend a lot of time piecing the video together, and eventually we just felt like that was time better spent in study, kind of doing the process that we're talking about, I think, and then just going live. That we go live every Sunday before this happened. There's no pre-recording and editing, so that's the process we kind of leaned into,
and we felt okay with that. And it did that first James, that took me almost an entire day to edit and render it. And then some people may remember that the uploading of it then took so long that it wasn't ready to go at the time it was supposed to go. So I felt like we got so caught up in some of our process that one of the things that slipped through the crack was this main point, ironically. And then the other thing that happened, for me at least, is that I am time conscious. I'm not so rigid that I map out by minute, point by point. But there was a point yesterday where I did become aware in our message of the time. And I do remember towards the end kind of feeling like, all right, we gotta
rein it in.
We gotta rein it in. We need to get going.
Well, and also let's keep in mind that we have added a children's moment and a memory verse. So we've added a time which we're getting positive response about, but we haven't shaved the sermon appropriately to make that all fit into a similar time.
To start shaving.
It's time to rein it in, we recognize from yesterday. So, that's our process. I think behind the scenes, we've gotten a little fun with things. You tend to play with the crew's mind here a little bit on Sunday.
I do.
I think the first Sunday probably we were in our seats 20 minutes before we went live and just looking things over and seeing how it was going to work. Yesterday, we went through the welcome. And after the welcome, when we went to the first song, you left the stage, went downstairs, came back, got your keys, went downstairs again, and got the PowerPoint up and loaded during the production time. So you're starting to get pretty comfortable with pushing the limits of how we are prepared.
And I've actually been very comfortable because I do remember that first Sunday. We were all right, everyone's ready. And then because I sensed tension in the room, just for fun, I said, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee about 2 minutes before service started, which has become this joke now, is that we're about to start, there goes Dan.
Right. Or something like, oh, we've got 5 minutes, there's lots of time, let's, what else can we do?
Let's tweak PowerPoint. Right. And when we talk about PowerPoint, understand, so this is a little bit of the technology that goes on. There's actually two different PowerPoints. There's what you and I have behind us, and that was actually what I needed to go get yesterday. Nick Robbins, who runs technology, and you're about to see a little bit of how he does that in a moment. Nick has the song slides, he's got my PowerPoint, he's got his version, and then I have my version. And there's some subtle differences, but what I realized a couple minutes before the service was I'd actually brought up the wrong PowerPoint for me. Nick had the right one. So I knew we could start because we start on this basic screen. That wasn't a problem. And then during the first song, I just needed to run down, get the correct PowerPoint off the downstairs computer. But I did. I ran downstairs, realized I had left my keys up here. My office was locked. So I came up, I grabbed the keys. And again, I had no worries. But it's fun to see the reaction. So Brad, tell me, I mean, I'm good. How are you when it's the minutes leading up?
Oh, I tend to be focused. So I tend to be very focused on what I'm going to communicate. I have my notes. I need to know where everything is. My phone has to be off. My keys have to be down. I'm kind of singularly minded. A lot of the other crew are watching the YouTube feed, commenting. You're also uploading to your own social media during the time. I cannot manage it all. I'm getting texts and things. I completely ignore it. I'm very singularly focused on how. Yes,
I'll say, oh,
look what they're posting. Yeah. I can't manage that all. I'm kind of very in the zone. So I tend to try to get, although yesterday probably I didn't get up here till about 2 minutes before we went live.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting more comfortable with the cues, and here we go. But yeah, I tend to be focused on my notes. Is everything in place?
Yeah. Now that's interesting that you say that, because that's actually why I do show up so early on Sunday morning, because I need to get my head in that place. I'm not that guy that can just walk in 5 minutes before a service and not have done anything mentally to get my head in the place. That did actually happen years ago at another church, where I was much younger and prone to sleeping in. And one Sunday morning, my alarm did not go off, and I woke up. Now, I'm not exaggerating. This is not an exaggeration. I woke up, realized what time it was, got dressed, ran to the church. This was a small church, small town church. Walked in the back door, walked down the aisle, turned around and said, "Good morning and welcome."
Wow.
It was that tight. Now, I only did that once, and then I did grab an elder and I said, from here on out, if I'm not here a half hour beforehand, you need to give me a call. Now, I've never had that happen again. But I do. I come in early, and I like to come in when there's no one else around, so that I'm not getting distracted, and I can just get my head in that place. Now, that's our process, but some of you may not realize what the room kind of looks like here in the sanctuary during this time. So what I'd like to do right now is I just want to show a video of behind the scenes. So those of you who are at home, you're seeing glimpses, you're seeing carefully placed camera angles, but here's a little bit of what it looks like for all of us when we're in the room. These are videos that were taken live during one of our streaming, because you said it, I'll get up during the music, and I do. I like to take some videos. Here's what we're seeing on Sunday morning. So, I mean, the first thing I notice is it's a mess.
It's a mess.
I mean, this room, when the day comes that we need to go back to in-house.
Hopefully it's going to be like weeks. You give us some weeks to put things back together, because on top of the main auditorium being somewhat of a mess, there are places where the windows are blocked out to cut down on
glare in other places. Yeah.
There are lamps that have been moved. We might not go into all the details of all the things that are kind of shifted and moved. The office has been taken out and moved to Beth's home. Like, there are things that are not where they used to be.
That's
when
right.
we were fully operational.
Yeah, and the return will take time. And then also what you also see in that video is why just coming back and continuing to live stream when we come back is not going to be as simple as that. Right. There's no way we can do an in-room worship service with this mess. It doesn't work anymore. Now, having said that, though, let's talk a little bit about the return.
Okay, the return.
The return. So we've made a couple comments about this, and what I want to do is I want to walk through, maybe with a little bit more detail, why we feel we're approaching a time of return, why we feel that we can do it in compliance with the governing authorities, and why it is also very tentative, and some of the steps that we are uncertain about to be able to do this. So, of course, we know that almost 2 months ago, the state of Maine went on a stay-at-home order, and very limited as to how many people can come together in a room. But a couple weeks ago, the governor of Maine presented a tentative plan in stages for return. We're currently in stage 1 that allows for gatherings of under 10. Now, in fact, that's already going to affect our elder meetings, because we've been Zooming every week for elders meetings, and now we said, well, now actually we can come back. There's less than 10 of us. We can come back together.
So this week will be our first in-person meeting for
almost 2 months, 6 weeks, Stage 2 of the governor's plan, which tentatively is scheduled to begin in June, now allows for gatherings under 50 49 or under. Now, when she presented that plan and I heard that, that's what I latched onto. Gatherings of under 50. And that's where I started saying, if we get creative, we can make this work in a way that respects the governing authorities. And the plan that we're working on is twofold. Multiple services, which we've done that before. A few years ago when we were renovating the sanctuary, we had some problems. We had to move to the fellowship hall. We knew we couldn't fit the entire Calvary family in the fellowship hall, so we went to 2 services. More often than not, I've served churches that had multiple services. I'm very comfortable doing that. I enjoy having multiple services. So we will go to a multiple service format, each service having multiple locations. One location being here in the room. The other location, our original plan was streaming to the fellowship hall. Now, there is a reason, and I'm not going to get into it because it's a little technical. There is a reason why the lower auditorium won't work for that. But initially, we thought we could make the fellowship hall work for that. And then a few people said, well, can you also do the gymnasium? And we, right now, we're just saying no, because that's going to require some equipment. We don't entirely have that equipment right now. Likewise, some people have asked, what about drive-in services? Because that's now allowed in phase 1. Same thing. Drive-in services they're going to require new technical know-how, and they're going to require new equipment. And we just want to focus on what we can do, and we want to do it well. Right. And we feel that all things being equal, we've gotten pretty savvy for the online streaming. Now, again, we know that there are technical difficulties. We know that the sound sometimes has problems, and we're working on it. Yeah. There's a new difficulty now with the idea of streaming in the fellowship hall, that what we've realized is our current configuration in the fellowship hall is not set up for that much bandwidth.
In internet. Our internet service will not handle
a live stream.
Right.
We're looking at it. We're working on it. We also need new equipment because, as you saw in that video, we're using the whole stage area. And in order to take these cameras to the back of the sanctuary so they're out of the way, and in order to do some sound, is going to take a whole new setup. So we're going to have to learn a new setup. We're going to have to fix the streaming problem in the fellowship hall, and we're going to have to get some new equipment to do that, all the while being aware of financial restraints, and things like that. So these are some of the challenges that we're facing.
And that's just for the broadcast itself, or for giving the service, making it happen. We're going to have to do an in-person service that's also streamed or broadcast on another location on the campus. But then, in addition, there's all the logistics of how do we actually get groups of 50 into the right room.
And how do we keep it at 50?
How do we keep it at 50? Additionally, we are talking about how do we clean and sanitize between groupings. So that's going to take some new teams of volunteers. That's a whole nother element. We're also talking about what we do with children's ministry, and many churches are really scaling that back, and we're probably going to scale it back at least initially to try to focus on just getting people here, managing all the logistics. And so probably the youngest kids, we'll try to provide something for them, but also we got to work on volunteers and everything that was in place in terms of volunteer teams and communicating with them. That's all going to have to be rebuilt, if you will.
Right.
I mean, we know who to reach out to, but we're not just going to pick up on the first Sunday of June as though nothing happened.
Yeah, you were scheduled, so
we're going to have to re-engage with everyone and communicate with them. And in the meantime, we got to pick up the mess that we've made in these 2 months. So there's still a lot to it, and that would only be phase 2. Then there'd be a phase 3 potentially, and then that's a new plan. Yeah. And so there's just a lot of logistics to it. Some of it has to do with our technology. Some of it has to do with our building structure, the right volunteers, communication. There's just a lot to it.
There are. And these are all things that we're working on. And let me also say something a little bit about maintaining the numbers. Part of the conversation we've had as elders is that if we're going to do this, and say that we're doing it in compliance with the state. We're not going to do that with a wink and a nudge. We're not going to say, oh yeah, we're in compliance, and we're going to do it with integrity because we're believers in Christ. We represent him. We're going to be, God is a God of truth. So if we say we're going to do it the right way, we're going to do it the right way. Those are things that we're working out. Now, not every church is choosing to do the same thing. There are some churches that are, well, first of all, there are some churches that are saying, we have too many people to even do groups of 50. And then there are other churches that are saying, we're just moving ahead and we're doing our own thing anyway.
And then I've read of some churches, and even this is something that's been talked about in our home. My kids are saying things like, it's going to be strange to come back. Like, we want to come back, but we wish we could come back to what we knew.
Yes.
And so there are some churches that are saying we're not going to do anything in the phases until we can come back to exactly what we had pre-shelter at home order.
Yeah.
So that's...
And I'll be honest, I resonate with that because I have had in my head, before the new stages came out, a grand return and a celebration, a massive family in the room celebration. And my biggest hesitation, even though I was the one saying, oh, I think we could do this, I had to come to terms with the fact of, if we do this in stages, it's not going to be that celebration that I wanted. Now, here's some other things people have brought up. Some people have said, I don't know if I'm comfortable returning yet. So they wanted to know, are we still going to stream at home? We are still going to be offering streaming at home because we recognize not everyone's comfortable coming at home. I will say this, and this is what I'm struggling with right now. I am struggling with us becoming too comfortable staying at home because the church is called to gather. And that in-person gathering is important. A little over a year ago, we talked about what is the church. And one of the things we said as part of that series is church is not a thing we do. It's not a place we go to. It's who we are. And we are the church Monday through Saturday. But we also said that there is a sense that we are most the church when we have gathered together. So the idea that there might be some in the body who are saying, hey, listen, you're still doing this streaming thing. I get to kick it at home, and it's so much more relaxing and easier. I'm just going to do that. There may come a time where we say, okay, now we're going to go through a season where we're not going to offer the live stream because it's that important that we come together. But that's going to be down the road. Right now, we are wrestling with what does this look like. Different churches are going to do different things. Now, I recognize that some of the churches that are doing different things also have a different understanding of the role of the church in compliance with the state. And there are certain scriptures that have been discussed over the last few weeks in the church. So, Brad, one thing you and I, because we have been having conversations about those scriptures, and we've been hearing statements from other believers as well. Next Monday, for the Monday recap, we're going to do this a little differently than we normally do. Next Monday, you and I are going to walk through some of the key scriptures that have informed decisions, and we're not addressing what other churches are doing, and we're not even making like the Calvary official statement. We just want to talk about those passages and some things to keep in mind, not just as how does the church respond to the state, but how do we as individual believers in Christ, what does the Bible tell us about compliance with the state? When do we comply? When do we not comply? And if we are going to practice civil disobedience, what is a Christ-like way to do that? That'll come next week.
Okay, we need a week to prepare for that.
We need a week to prepare for that. Anyway, hey, I hope this was interesting. I hope it was informative so that you know not only what we hope is coming up. Again, so if the nutshell of the return would be this, tentatively, beginning in June, in compliance with the state, multiple services, multiple locations, each location under 50, so that'd be 49. We are still, though, working out the details. I would appreciate your prayers for the details, the technology, the equipment, all of this.
And the wisdom, really.
And the wisdom.
To come together as leadership and make the right decisions for Calvary in this there's a lot to consider. There's a lot of things to read, and people are putting out a lot on church blogs and consulting to help us all think through the questions we need to answer. And there's a lot involved.
There is, and we're hearing from a variety of inputs as well. Until then, just for fun, I'm going to go back to that video again so you can look one more time at what it looks like behind the scenes. Until then, everyone, thank you for joining us online. And we look forward to seeing you Wednesday for our James study.
Yes.
And then next Sunday for worship.